Hey everyone, let's talk about browser wars, shades of Netscape, Mozilla, Internet Explorer. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. It was a nice weekend down here. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong Gang, coming at you with our Monday show. We've got, as usual, some really good stuff to talk about, and we've got some great gang members to talk about it with. Let me introduce you to them. First of all, you need Jackson Better to open up in here, so we've got a pair of Jacks. Jack Gold and Jack Poller, welcome both of you.
Thank you.
Joining the Jacks is the Dean, Mike Vizard, up in New York. Mike, welcome. How is everything?
Everything's great. How are you?
Good. Let's jump right into it. I teased we're having browser wars, but it's not Mozilla, it's not Internet Explorer, it's not even Mark Andreessen and Netscape. It's a whole new generation of browsers and a whole new war, perhaps. What do we got here, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here myself. Everybody seems to be talking about we're having a new type of browser and then we'll have some sort of AI functionality dropped into it. But every time I turn around and use my browser lately, some new AI functionality seems to be added to it. So it looks like Google's got to do much of the same thing. And I know the Firefox people are talking about similar things. And then we've got OpenAI, and I think Perplexity has Comet. So, my question to you, Alan, is this fight over even before it got started, or what do you think's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, kidding aside, browser wars just seem to be something that pops up every 10 years or so, it seems. But maybe 7. But, a couple things. First of all, it's very hard to say what the Perplexity and OpenAI browsers are going to do to challenge Chrome's dominance, because you really can't get your hands on them, right? The OpenAI version browser is rumored to be coming shortly. Perplexity, I've been on the waiting list for a couple days already. I signed up, I think it was Wednesday when I first saw the news about it. But unless you're like a Perplexity Max customer or whatever the highest tier is, you can't. You're on a waiting list. So when I get it, I'll let you know. But here's the lay of the land. Chrome is the king of browsers. Google's Chrome. You've got Microsoft's Edge, which is a Chromium-based browser, and you've got Apple Safari, that has a bit of a loyal following. I don't know how loyal in the Mac world. But Google is certainly king. What's it going to take to topple them? Well, you probably need to reshuffle the deck, and I think we look at AI as a way to reshuffle the deck. Mike, as you pointed out, Google's been building AI into Chrome. Whether we call Gemini and everything else that they've called their AI over the last couple of years. I think a real issue here, though, is from a consumer user point of view. What does having an AI browser mean? Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is Big Brother, right? What is it going to, in order for it to work, it's going to have a lot of access into how I think, what I do, where I go. Is this just another big, that sucking sound you hear? Is all of your information being sucked up into somebody's LLM? And is that what this is going to be about? I hope not. But, I didn't even know Firefox was still out there, to tell you the truth. They're not much of a factor in market anymore. But we've been through browser wars before. We'll see. We'll see who wins this one.
Jack Gold, what's your take on this? Because it seems to me like, at least my first taste of all this stuff, the user experience is kind of clunky and cumbersome, and it's just random bits of information that's related to something that I'm looking at, and it's usually trivial.
Yeah, so there's a few things going on here I think that are important. Ellen, I certainly support everything you just said. But there's another piece to this, I think, and that is that ultimately, do you trust AI? Are you going to trust AI to give you the information that you want or that you need? And I think there's two parts to that. Number one is, consumers are kind of open to this at the right price, which is free, right? Businesses, on the other hand, are willing to pay for a service, but they demand a lot more security and privacy capability. Imagine, I'll make something, a Bank of America, right? All of a sudden deployed Perplexity browsers to all of their users. Can you imagine the amount of information Perplexity is going to suck up from all of those users into their core AI capabilities? It's just not feasible. It's not going to happen. So I think you're going to see continued rollouts of AI. I think you're going to see more depth. Alan, you're right. Chrome has got the lion's share of the marketplace. I don't see that going away. Consumers don't switch unless there's a real reason to do it. And most people are pretty happy with Google, even though Google is, tracking us anyway, but they're going to stick with it. So unless you can find a real reason to change over, I mean, OpenAI or Perplexity has to offer some real benefit that Google isn't going to have. And I'm not sure that's going to happen. There is one other piece to this, by the way, and that is that, as you guys probably saw last year, the feds basically told Google they had to sell off Chrome because it was a monopoly. If they do, and one of these guys picks them up, then it changes the whole issue, and changes the whole marketplace. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Even if it ultimately happens, they're going to drag this through the courts for years. But that could be a game changer long term.
To that point, Jack, what I find is by the time the courts and the government get involved in something like that, technology has a way of taking care of it. If these AI browsers are in fact a better mousetrap, Chrome will get knocked off its perch. If they're not, they'll go away pretty quickly, like all of the recent iterations of Microsoft's browsers.
Yeah. But we can't underestimate Google's capability in AI. Sorry, Jack. And I think a lot of the market is underestimating what Google is doing in AI because it's less transparent to these big guys that have these huge financial inputs.
And I argue that these browsers aren't going away, and I think we have to split up and look at consumer behavior differently than enterprise behavior. And we had this discussion here, in fact, on the gang a couple months ago now, in terms of enterprise browsers and yet another, professional enterprise browser. And at the time I said, I don't understand why Google doesn't just start sucking these features into Chrome and killing that business. And part of it is because they're, as Jack Gold said, they're investing in AI very heavily. So on the enterprise side, there's a lot of different competition where enterprises look at very specific capabilities that they're concerned about in data security, identity security, data loss, all these other things. And that's helping them make a decision on one browser or another. If we look at the consumer side, however, what I think we're seeing, and this is a huge risk to Google, is a change in behavior. And that is people are not going to Google as their primary search engine, but they're instead going to the AI tools, particularly Perplexity, as a search engine. And wrapping that search engine up in a customized browser that can somehow take advantage of that and make that experience better is a huge risk to Google on the consumer side, not for the browser itself, but for Google's ad revenue. The more people start using the AI engines, the less money Google gets on ad placement.
Right. I hear that sometimes when, Tracy Reagan, who's down on the show today, is an example of that, where she says she always uses AI search first. But the data suggests that that's still the minority behavior. I don't know if it'll grow, but if the AI search is built into my standard browser and search engine anyway, I don't know if I'm going to go find another window to go look at something outside of Google, or, is inertia just going to be on Google's side?
Well, there's a couple of things there. Number one, I believe there is a Washington Post article talking about OpenAI's impact on Google search. Now, I gave up my Post subscription, so I don't have access to it. But numbers I've seen is that open, or let's call it AI search versus regular Google search, is as high as 26% of the market. So still not a majority, but given for how long it's been around, 26% is a pretty decent number. But I think there's another reason why you're seeing people move, in this case, to AI searches. Google search itself isn't the Google search that we grew up with here, right? You search Google today first, you get your AI thing, right? Your AI summary or whatever, and it's gotten better. I'll give it that. Then you get about 3 or 4 sponsored posts. Then you get about 3 YouTube videos, and then somewhere down here you actually get your search results. And more often than not, they're kind of useless. I've had Google search results now that go to malware sites. I've had Google search results that are just nonsense. I almost get the impression that whole Google search business, not counting the AI and sponsored stuff, is on autopilot and the guy's asleep at the wheel. So I think that's a bigger reason why people are looking for a new search. And that's
agreed.
Driving it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would say in my peer group, now it's obviously not everybody because we're all in the high tech world, but in my peer group, most people, if they use Google search, they basically say, let's, page down past the first page of results and maybe even the second page, because it's either ad placement or search engine optimized results that are not, they're fake results. Right? They're not good. They're useless. And the value of some of the AI engines like Perplexity, I've used a lot, is that it gives you a summary of the output that you're looking for, plus links to all the places it's in. It's telling you where it's getting the information from. So I feel more confident in chasing backwards in its search, how it did it, and going and investigating further, than that it's not hallucinating and creating something out of whole cloth. And I think some of the other engines do, and that's the problem.
But here's the ultimate long-term challenge. Today, people use browsers because they're free. And they're free because they're ad-supported. And they're ad-supported because Google's doing stuff to track you and know what you're interested in. Are they going to use AI systems that give them the information they're looking for, but have no way of generating revenue from that information? Because you're not going to be seeing ads. So that's the ultimate problem. That's the problem that Google has as well with the AI summary on top. A lot of people never go beyond that AI summary. And so ultimately their ad revenues could decline. And that's the problem with all of these guys is are you going to make me pay for using the Comet browser? Are you going to make me pay to use some of the other AI systems, which they may, maybe it's the freemium approach, but ultimately they've got to generate revenue. And so if you're not somehow showing me ads, how's that going to get paid for? And how many consumers are actually going to spend $10 a month or $20 a month or whatever the number is to get that information?
Well, but part of that comes in the use of the interaction from the users as training data. So it's going to lower the cost of the training data for the AIs. Whether that's sufficient, I have no idea. I mean, those economics are crazy to begin with.
It does trouble my soul a little bit that, some sort of carbon somewhere is being kicked off every time somebody generates a free AI thing for me. And I'm like, really? Was it necessary? You could have just asked.
There is that. Look, it's browser wars. I guess we'll have to see. Until, as I mentioned, I'm on the waiting list for comment. When I get my hands on it, I'll give us a report of what I think. But I think it's just people don't value, on the consumer side, people don't value their privacy. They don't value their information. And this is just, a continuing, and I don't want to just blame OpenAI and Perplexity here. I mean, the Mag 7 tech guys, the Metas, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples, they are all just feasting like pigs at a trough on all of our personal information. And that's what makes their whole engines go round and round. And these $4 trillion, or well, only NVIDIA's $4 trillion, but you know,
So far.
$2-3 trillion valuations.
I
And
will tell you though, I am careful now more, not as much as I should be, to think twice about what I do enter in for a search request or anything else, because I know I'm going to get inundated with all kinds of crap. So, and you'll never see me type in Red Sox because I just don't want all that kind of Red Sox information.
I do. I figure anyone who supports the Red Sox is going to spend money trying to sell to me. Bring it on. All right. On that note, let's take a break. We're going to come back and talk about V-Block here. Robots everywhere. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and I guess it was only a matter of time before somebody connected robots to 3D printers and has come up with an open source platform called using Berkeley's open source humanoid light project. And they're saying that, in a matter of weeks for less than maybe $5,000, you can build your own robot. I'm not quite clear how well it works, but Jack Gold, are we on the cusp of having, robots that people can just go down the store and pick up for a couple of grand? And how cheap can these things get?
Well, they can get real cheap depending on what you want them to do. Look, historically, let's look back, way back when. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play around with, ham radio and build my own stuff. Right? Today, you couldn't possibly do that just because of the sophistication of the circuitry. But in those days, you learned a lot by doing that. We're really at the same place with robotics right now. We're still in the early stages, and you can get some very sophisticated performance capabilities by 3D printers, by going down to your local hardware store and buying gears and valves and stuff, right? It may not be as elegant as some people would like, but the ability to do this kind of sourcing of components and the ability to do experimentation by amateurs is actually great for the overall marketplace, because what it's going to show us is that, and at the end of the day, robots don't necessarily need to cost $250,000. Sure, you're going to have $250,000 robots running production lines at GM and Ford and Honda and Toyota. But for the rest of us, smaller, purpose-built robots are going to be the thing. And if you want to build your own, why not? Go for it. The tools are there, the capabilities are there, the experimentation is there, and I think this is a great thing for the overall robotics marketplace.
so when I can get a Daryl Hannah from Blade Runner robot, dial me up. But seriously, you know what this reminds me of? You guys, we're all of an age here. You remember early in the PC computer era, where you could build. I mean, that's how many of the well, not IBM obviously, but you go back to the Apples and a lot of these early computer models. At first, we used to have the computer user groups, and you could go to the group and they tell you, oh, you could get this circuit here, and you didn't have kind of the prefab motherboard that you got now and everything. But it started with tinkerers like this, right? They were building computers, and then they started building computers and kind of kept a recipe that they could repeat. Some kid in a dorm in Texas started doing that, and he did pretty well for himself, right? It's That's what I think we're going to see here. You're going to see tinkerers, but that's going to give rise to cottage industries, and it gives rise. And who's the Dell of robots?
I think that tinkerer is now a boomer playing around with robots in his basement of his mansion somewhere and is going to go build Dell labeled robots, and we're going to get them from every other PC maker as well.
There is one final challenge though that we have to be very careful of, right? The old days, Ellen, I agree, you know, the early guys, you know, the Compacts of the world, the Dells of the world, Gateway, I mean, we can go through the whole names, right? But when you built a PC, there wasn't a whole lot, maybe other than electrical shock, a whole lot of risk to you as a person. Robots are a little different. And we have to be very careful that when people start building robots that are going to be wandering around the house, or you want them to do stuff for you, or, you know, they're cleaning or whatever they're doing, there is some possible risk. And so there's got to be some level of safety, security capability that
Are you
built.
talking about the laws of robotics? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, if it's physically moving around the house, it could do damage.
Well, you know, I think that's an interesting concern, because right now you can go out and buy a commercial quadcopter with a video camera in it for $200, and that thing's got four swirling death propellers on it that are, you know, they can take your head off if you're not careful, right? And some of the bigger ones. And so, I mean, these things exist. If you look at 3D printers, which is what makes this possible, the first 3D printers were up in the same price range, right? They were $5,000 units. Now you can get $100, $200 gets you a fully functional 3D print that can print everything that you need to build this robot, and it just doesn't have the electronic circuitry on it. So I think this is a great innovation. It follows, 2 months ago, Hugging Face announced their equivalent to this, a $3,000 to $5,000 robot. And I think this is a brilliant innovation to open source and make all of this available. And it's really going to help, raise another generation of STEM interested people rather than people who sit around and play video games. And there's nothing wrong with playing video games, but
yes, there is.
The educational component of trying to, not even experimenting with it, but simply getting the parts together and printing your own parts and assembling this thing and getting it to do the robot equivalent of Hello World, right? In this case, these are, bipedal robots. Getting it to stand up on its own, that's a hell of an accomplishment. And I think that, especially for a younger generation, having the opportunity to play with this at reasonable price points is a remarkable opportunity for the world.
Yeah,
Jack Caller, is somebody going to hack into these things, and I'm going to wake up one morning and there's going to be a robot chasing me around my house with a knife, or what?
Well, yes. If you give me your address, we'll make sure that happens today. A little Chuck E. Cheese version of this, that would be great.
Well, I mean, why does it have to be someone hacking in? Maybe it just went off the rails. Yeah. As I said, shades of Blade Runner.
As a cybersecurity guy, I always think, and I appreciate Jack Gold's opinion too, that we really do have to think about security and bake security, both cybersecurity and physical security, into these things. And that's really hard when it's a free open source project. And, the developers are much more, they're Berkeley, PhD students are much more, interested in getting the thing to walk on its own than they are to make sure it doesn't get hacked. So yes, I think that is a concern that we do have to think about.
Yeah, no doubt they're doing an AI search to tell them how to do it.
Well, no, they might still be using Google, but let me throw another kind of view at the panel here and get your thoughts. This is a great counterweight to what's going on in terms of robotic development at the enterprise industry level, right? I don't know how many of you watched, all those videos that we always see on those bad Google searches, but how well they're doing now with, four-legged robots being used for things like bomb situations, hostage situations, war situations, right? the big guys are building robots that really are pretty advanced, right? We're not just talking pure bipedal. I mean, they can run faster than animals, and they don't fall down. And when they do, they get up, and they have you marry a little AI into it, and they're autonomous, right? I think we need this sort of homegrown, brew your own kind of thing, because that's going to, is that for the 1%ers? Is that for the authoritarian governments? Who gets to use this cutting edge, latest style? You need, this is the equivalent of a well-armed militia.
Yeah. Yeah. And the big ones are also 25, 30, 40K, 50K. We're talking about big bucks, right? You're certainly not going to buy one, or most people aren't going to buy one for their home. So we do need the lower end, and we need the lower end to do specific tasks for us, which is, highly valuable. I agree with you, Alan. It's going to be a move. I was going to say move down, but it's not really a move down so much as just less costly, right? Less complex. And there will be advantages that we'll see. Jack Power, I agree with you. The kids playing with STEM on these things are going to, some of them, the 2%, the 5%, whatever is going to be, are going to come up with some pretty interesting technology capabilities, as always happens in this marketplace. And so anything we can do to advance robotics in general, even if it's small steps, today you've got the high-end robotics. I don't know what the number is, 20, 30, 40,000 perhaps engineers working on them. We're talking about, in this space, millions and worldwide. And so there will be some real discoveries that come out of it, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. And for better and for ill, I'm sure there's some militia folks out there playing around with homegrown robots too, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt.
But it's open source. We're moving to robotics as open source, just as we did with software, just as to some extent we did with hardware. And so I think this is a good thing long term.
Yeah, the democratization of robotics is, I might argue, a little overdue. We need to put this into everybody's hands, and let's see what happens.
I agree.
Agreed. All right, let's take a break on this one. We'll come back. We've got C-Block, Scattered Spiders, Shades of Thermonuclear War. I don't know. Is Matthew Broderick behind this one? You're watching TechStrong, gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back, and if you've been tracking the cybersecurity news, a lot of folks have been following this hacker group called Scattered Spiders, and we live in this age where we think that the cyber criminals are highly organized, but maybe not. It turns out a bunch of teenagers are wrecking havoc, started in the UK, and then they work their way into the US. Jack Poller, what's going on here? Are teenagers now the worst enemy in cybersecurity, or what?
Well, yes, but I think so. Let's start with the first statement of well organized, right? And just because you're teenagers doesn't mean you're not well organized. Also, Scattered Spider is well organized, but not centralized. There's a difference there as well, and it's actually taking a page from the playbook of spycraft. Really, is traditional spycraft is that a loosely associated group of people that doesn't know that not everybody knows who everybody else is in the organization means the organization doesn't fall apart if one or a few people are compromised. In this case, what we had is an arrest of 4 people aged 17, 19, 19, and 20, I think, in the UK. being charged with various forms of cybercrime associated with the recent attacks on the Marks and Spencer chain and a couple of other major retailers in the UK. And I think that they match what we believe is the modus operandi of Scattered Spider, which is highly focused attacks on a particular industry, retail, or the last big one that they were known for was the MGM attacks and the other hotel and hospitality attacks in Las Vegas last summer. They do this through sophisticated social engineering, and it really is highlighting that despite all of the, esoteric, highly sophisticated zero-day attacks people think where they're literally, hacking in through the network and confusing your computers and making something, what Scattered Spider is well known for is impersonating your IT staff or impersonating people calling into IT staff and social engineering access in that way. And it's really highlighting how easy it is to social engineer. And it's amazing that 17-year-olds are able to convince somebody that they're part of a company and convince the IT people to, give them passwords and usernames and all the other stuff to get access.
But that's always been the weak spot, right? Malware, with malware, I don't remember the exact number, but something in the 40 to 50% range of all hacks for companies are because somebody did something silly. I was going to say stupid. That's not fair, but you let somebody in, or it was social engineering, right?
Right. So the Verizon data breach investigation reports, the DBIR, says that anywhere, depending on the year, anywhere between mid 60s to mid 75% of attacks originate through a human issue, whether it's a compromised account or a social engineering attack, but somebody somehow a bad guy got access to somebody's username and password and MFA credentials and got in somehow or another. And that's where most of these data breaches occur. And that's where the risk is. So there's I could go down and talk about how we defend against it, but let's sort of think about Scattered Spider. One of the other interesting things about this group is they are the ones who've been arrested, and there were a couple who were arrested last year in the US, have been US or UK citizens, with, I think, one of the people in this recent arrest was not a UK citizen, but they are all native English speakers or 100% fluent in US English or British English dialect, and can easily mimic it, which means that all of the written communications don't have your typical grammar errors or spelling errors, and the voice communications all sound like you're speaking to somebody who's a native speaker, because they are. And so you're losing the ability to detect the traditional cues that it was an impersonation attack or a phishing or a phishing attack, which is, like I said, misspellings or poor grammar or, those types of things. So they are much more convincing and then therefore pose a much bigger risk to organizations.
So I would posit that with the use of AI, even non-native English speakers are pretty good writing.
It's getting harder and harder.
And that's what makes it harder. What I find really fascinating here, though, is, I've been in security 30 years. When I first got involved in security, it was the script kiddies. Remember? That's what we called them, the script kiddies. And they would do crap just for the same reason a dog does, just because they can. Right? They weren't necessarily even looking to make the money. They just wanted to prove they could break it. Then we started seeing people hack for finance, right? They were stealing money, making money and hacking. And then, of course, the rise of nation state, cyber warfare, and all of hacktivism and all of these other things. And here we are, full circle, back to the script kiddies almost. What's old is new. Some things don't change. What is disheartening is, as a security person, that we're still vulnerable to this crap, right? that here we are thinking we're defending the free world against the hugging bears or whatever the Russian sponsored and Chinese and North Korea and Iran sponsored groups, right? And we fight toe to toe with these bad guys who have the power of their countries behind them. And a bunch of kids are creating havoc like this.
Alan, but but who do you think are those nation state actors?
Well,
those
in my mind, they're people who work, for Q at MI6, and they come up with neat little things. But maybe they really are Matthew Broderick. I don't know.
They're not 30 to 50-year-old, sitting at an office desk the way we think of it. They're not the prototypical hacker in the hoodie. They're also 17 to 20-year-olds, and the reality is that in Russia, particularly, and in the former communist bloc countries, right, they are nation state sponsored in that the nations have told them, we won't arrest you, we'll leave you alone as long as you don't attack us, right? So
I think
you're a Russian criminal, right? Hands off Russia, go attack the United States, create as much havoc as you want.
So,
that's all
Jack,
good.
that might be true for Romania or Kazakhstan or the state of Georgia. I think when we talk Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, they are instruments of the state.
Yes.
And it's not just money, it's espionage and stealing state secrets.
I don't
So
disagree.
what does all these turn out at the end? Because these kids are relatively underage. They'll get fined, and maybe they'll have to go home.
Well, the ones in the U.S. wind up going to work for the NSA.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's my point. I think we're going to have to hire these kids.
Well, no, that's what we've done it. We've been doing that for 30 years, 40 years, right? Where do you think they get their recruits from?
But look, guys, it's important to note that a lot of this is just plain human error. And you're never going to get rid of that. We put tools in place. We try to educate users not to do silly things. But at the end of the day, people are busy. They're trying to get through stuff. Somebody calls them up on the phone. They got 14 other people on the line, and they say, sure, go for it. That's something that, even AI isn't going to solve for us. It's just human error. We're humans. That's number one. The second piece, though, is, and I think it's important to note that malware, bad actor stuff has moved to open source. You can go on the net and buy it, whatever you need for next to nothing, or you can get it for free. And that wasn't the case 5 or 10 years ago. And Alan, in the early days, it was probably the same with the script kiddies, right? Once somebody discovered something, they put it out there for others. So we're seeing a lot of that as well in this space, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. And I think the final piece is AI is going to make it really easy for me to call Mike, or not me to call Mike, but someone to call Mike and make it sound like it's Alan, right? Alan giving me instructions.
Mike knows Alan never calls him.
Okay, fair enough. But it's going to be, we've already seen examples of that, right? So this is really a tough problem to solve.
Well, it's a tough time to have, because, as great as AI is, and we spend 2/3 of our time every day on this show talking about it, it's also that double-edged sword. It's great for them too. It's great for them too.
And we have code phrases like, who played third for the Yankees last night? So
Or who was the third baseman after Clete Boyer?
Right.
It wasn't Clete, it was Ken.
We're going back to World War II, where GIs had all these questions for each other. You had to know if you were an American.
We'll have to hire Navajos, right?
Yeah, the wind talkers. Well, no, I think we've removed all mentions of those on the DoD websites now.
Actually, there's a new statute going up for those guys. So there's
hope. Well, we'll see. I'll see it when we believe it. Anyway, interesting stuff. Let's, I'm glad at least they're breaking this group, right? And we'll keep watching it.
It is important to note that they caught them very quickly, by the way. In the past, right, it took months or years.
I don't think they caught them all yet.
Well, I'll tell you something. We're usually pretty good at identifying the groups that are behind these things, but usually they're not anywhere in the jurisdiction where we can get them. And so
I think that's an important point, is that not only did we catch them, but they are in a jurisdiction where we can do something about it. And hopefully we will do something very, very, we'll make them pay so that as a deterrent for others.
There's weighing that, Jack, versus converting them, into the program. Right?
Embrace the power of and.
Yes. Okay.
I think little Dudley's going to school in Switzerland. See you later.
All righty. Well, guys, I think that's going to wrap our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, we opened up with a pair of jacks and went up from there. Interesting stories. As usual, we have a full TechStrong TV lineup immediately following, so check that out. But until tomorrow, this is Alan Schimmel. We're out. Bye-bye.